was actually named Frances, but her older sister couldn't say baby, just Bay. She was Bay her whole life. And she was the baby of 13 children. Now I'm the 7th of 8 children. And when one of us would get a contagious flu or something that hadn't gone through the whole family, we would be sent to Grandma Bay's small apartment to recuperate. What a treat. I remember my Grandma Bay cuddling me on the sofa, and we would watch TV, and I got to change the channels, something that I never got to do at home, except when it was her favorite soap opera. Sand through the hourglass. Grandma Bay played cards with me and board games and made cherry soda floats with vanilla ice cream. I was sad to go home. I remember when I was 5 and my younger brother 3, we went to spend the weekend with my paternal grandparents, Grandma Betty and Grandpa Art, in their fine brick home with antique furniture and lots of beautiful things that we weren't allowed to touch. Now I'm pretty comfortable sitting and playing on my own, but my younger brother was active, very, very active. And my poor grandparents spent the entire weekend doing damage control. Next to the foyer was an antique grandfather clock. And I remember my Grandpa Art winding the clock, and the weights lifted, and the pendulum went tick, tock, tick, tock. And perhaps time is relative. I was 15 when I got my first job in a pipe and supply warehouse. I would fill orders and count inventory. So imagine taking your cart and pushing it over to one of the many, many bins and counting out over 100 tank flanges, 1-inch tank flanges, and writing down the number and putting them back and moving to 3/4-inch tank flanges. Next to the foreman's office was a punch clock, a time clock, and we would rush in first thing in the morning and grab our card and punch clink into the punch card, and it would punch the date and the time. And this was particularly important because if we were even a minute late, our pay was docked. And that is how I learned that time is money. You know, I'm wearing this watch to remember. I was 25 when I met Bob. A friend set us up over and over again, and in time we found we could tolerate one another, and then we liked one another, and one night he gave me a little kiss on the cheek goodnight, and I was smitten. We restored an 1893 adobe home in a downtown neighborhood. Now, Bob was an architect, and I'm a landscape architect, and we formed a business, a partnership together, and we had an landscape architecture design firm, and we had it in the front room of our home. Now, occasionally, we just had to get out of the office. We just had to get away, and so we would walk downtown to one of the few restaurants back then, and we would have lunch. Now, one day, we were walking past down the street, and we saw Perry Jewelers, and we had a little extra time, so we stepped in, and I saw this watch. And Bob found a watch, and we bought these watches, and in that sweet little shop with smiling staff, exchanged watches. In May of 2015, Bob was diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer. We had about 2 years to live really fully, and we did. And we had a long goodbye after 29 fabulous years together. I wear this watch to remember that time is precious. Now, they say with time and experience comes wisdom. And I say with experience and time comes a sense of humor, or perhaps a good story. So I had hand drafted all the architectural architectural plans for about 20 years when the world was changing. Technology was changing, and I needed to learn computer-aided drafting, CAD. And so I enrolled at a class at Pima Community College. And what a wonderful learning community. And I found that I had a really hard time learning that. It was terrible. I wondered, you know, as a child, was I dropped on my head? But I persevered, and I'm glad I did. Soon after that, I was asked to teach a landscape design class at Pima. And I had lots of reasons why that was a terrible idea. I was way too busy, and I'm terrible at saying no. And so I taught my first class, and I loved it. You know, it said that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Sometimes it's work, but there's something to be said for that. So about 11 years ago, I was teaching students how to measure a landscape, how to pull tape measures, and I was bending over and I was pulling the tape and I was showing them different methods. And then I had divided them into small groups. And I had every year recommended that they coordinate with one another, that they meet and that they plan out how they're going to do that. And they seldom did, but this year was different. They had gathered out in the distance and they were deep in conversation. And I was so proud of them. And then one of the older students came over to me and he wouldn't look me in the eye. He said, "Mr. Grede, I've been elected to inform you that you have a hole in your pants." I reached behind, and sure enough, between my zipper and my belt loop, the seam had split completely. You know, when I was younger, I would have been traumatized, paralyzed with embarrassment. And this time, I simply sidestepped along the wall, grabbed my coat, tied it around my waist, and we finished the class. They say that time heals all wounds. And there's a little bit of truth in that, I find. And 5.5 years ago, a little more, Todd and I married. He's a wonderful man with a fondness for numbers, and he's a rocket scientist. And so we decided to marry on March 20th, 3/20/2020. We would never forget our anniversary. And to prepare, we wanted a wedding dance. And so we went to a ballroom dance studio. And we learned to dance, and we prepared a wedding dance. Now, if you remember what was happening in March of 2020, that is the time of COVID and COVID restrictions, and our venue wasn't available any longer. So we had a ceremony in our backyard. most of the guests attending by Zoom. And at the end of the ceremony, we folded up the chairs and we danced. Now, when COVID restrictions lifted and we could return to the dance studio, we decided to take our weekly lessons and continue. Not because we're particularly good, but because after a challenging day of work, we could forget the troubles of the world, hold each other in our arms, and dance. Time and time